I would like to now recognize that we are convening for a St. Cloud Council workshop this Thursday, November the 7th. With that, I'll call this meeting to order, and Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mayor Blackwell.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Matheny.
Here.
Councilmember Cooper.
Here.
Councilmember Askew.
Here.
Councilmember Trace.
Here.
Tonight, our agenda is the discussion regarding the Hastings property. You ready?
Sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm Michael Tenaro, Deputy Parks and Recreation Director. I have a brief overview of a discussion based on the purchase of the property of Hastings Ranch. I have a few slides, and if you have any other questions, I can possibly answer them or direct you to the staff that can.
Okay.
Just wanted to show you the outline of the Hastings Ranch. It's in the north of the city limits. That would be the property that we are purchasing off of Narcoossee Road. We have a few funding options that we've included in here tonight. There is a possibility of 2 grants that could be used for future funding, the Florida Communities Trust and the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We also have city funding, where we would purchase or use a lease option to purchase the property. The third option, to pursue a partnership with Osceola County, where they would pay a portion of the property, we would, and then we would go into an agreement as far as maintenance of the property. Fourth option listed up here is OUC purchasing the property for the city with the idea of OUC getting a contract extension with the city. Basically, we are here tonight to request that on November 21st, the City Council either decides to proceed or not with the concept of going with the contract price of $5.75 million, and also to include with that agenda to have a 6-month due diligence for funding purposes, so the staff can do the due diligence and work on all the funding options and vet all the options. That is my presentation tonight.
That was brief.
Good
Thank
job.
you. Good job. Mr. Manzares.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So, as Mike pointed out, where we are with this tonight was we wanted to get, before we dove into the contract preparation and putting this together for final action, you're not taking any action on this. We just wanted to get a little, basically a thumbs up consensus that this council was okay with moving forward with it. The intent would be to bring back an agreement at the 5.75 is the asking price we understand for the property from the seller. So we would come back with an agreement, a real estate contract purchase agreement, to include a 6-month due diligence period. That due diligence period would include the usual things associated with the purchase of real property, but would be mostly focused on coming back to the council probably on more than one occasion during that period to discuss the funding options for the acquisition of the property. So again, we're not looking for any action. We just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. I can tell you that the city utilized the provision of statutes that allows for appraisals to be done on the property. Where there were 2 appraisals done on it, they are not subject to public disclosure. And I tell everybody that at this point, but the purchase price is consistent with those appraisals and is supported by the appraisals.
Councilmember Matheny.
I support the request.
That was it.
That's it.
Again, we're not asking you to take final action. As you know, these contracts, they take a little bit of time. And most importantly, we wanted the perspective. The seller has been very, very patient with the city in dealing with this, and we wanted to make sure they've been very good to work with so far. We wanted to make sure that we were moving in the right direction, so that if they had other options, they could avail themselves of them. And that's why we brought it back.
Well, I believe this is an amazing piece of property. It's ideally located. It has so much amazing potential to be a source of great enjoyment for residents for years and years and years to come. I'm certainly in favor of pursuing the purchase of this and authorizing this recommendation that you proceed. Any other input from the council? Councilman Askew.
I was graciously given a nice tour from Mr. Hastings. What a piece of property. It should be saved, and I appreciate the council wanting to jump on board with this. And I think especially our Parks and Rec, you guys do a great job, so we can turn this into something great or leave it the way it is or whatever we're planning on doing. So, I'm all for it.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. Dan, are we okay as far as time frame? I had talked to Mr. Sturgeon about, said something about 6 months to get some due diligence and find our grants and stuff like that. These grants are going to take maybe a year.
Well, and that's true.
And
That's a
can
good-
he extend,
Mr. Cooper,
would
that's,
he do that?
that's a good question, and, Wendy's the finance director's here, she can talk about that. But as Mike mentioned, and we really wanted to not dive in too far into the option
No, but I
issue
wanted to
point.
make sure we were
But
okay.
if you are gonna, if it's the council's intent to get staff to pursue the grant option, it's going to require more along the lines of what Mike suggested on maybe a lease option agreement with the seller. Because as you pointed out, it's going to take a lot longer than 6 months to get confirmation on the grants through the state program.
Yeah.
We have set this up to do so. The initial steps regard to the contract and the valuation of the property are consistent with the grant requirements, so that you could go that way if you wanted to go that direction. But as this works with these grants, you can't acquire the property as the ownership of the city until such time as you have the grant in place. So you can't buy the property and then apply for the grant. So we have to go through that. So, yeah.
Wendy?
Wendy, what is my name? Wendy Colasso, Finance Director. It's been a long night, sorry. Gosh, so in the spirit of conservation, great, and here I am with the news of how to do this magic and everything. So I'm going to provide and go back a slide for you to provide some transparency and kind of outline this. Option one, I want to make very sure for you in your question, Councilman Cooper, is that it's a $400,000 ask on the Florida Community Trust and a 60% cost on the land and conservation, which equates to $3.8 million. Big word here is the ability to realize it, right? There's a chance we might not get the grant. So, being that said, that's a good pot of money, but we're going with city funding in the event because this money will not materialize to really 2021, okay? So city funding options, as we do option two, one, we have the bond option, right? We bond the service. It's going to be about a $400K cost to debt a year. I want to caution you that this would get the city towards the debt limit of $10 million, which we don't want to do. So just kind of a cautionary tale there if we increase debt. On the second option, we have the lease to purchase option, which moves us for 5 years at $1.15 million, taking the $5.75 million. A much better option in the event while we do the grants and get that money materialized. Okay, just a suggestion. We can purchase this property outright with a combination of the available funds. The spread would be the Parks and Impact fees at $2.5 million right now, and the 1% fund, the 120, at 3.25. Impacts of that to consider is that every Park and Rec capital improvement project we have would stop because we'd use all the impact fees for this at $2.5 million, okay? Remember the revenue, we'd reduce the effect, and so it goes liquid really quick, and want you to have that for consideration. So we have the balances for you if you'd like that for rev and where we're getting them for the funds, but those are the options between the city funding. Pursuing the partnership with Osceola, that still, we'll get the details for you later on. And then the OUC purchases an extension of 8 years to the contract for this piece, and there are other details. So those are all the options to provide you some transparency to preserve this and do this purchase if you'd like.
Councilmember
Questions?
Trace.
I agree with everyone else. It's a beautiful piece of property. George took me around and showed me it a couple of months ago when we initially talked about this. My stance on this is a nice to have, not a need to have. I love parks, but it's just one of those, we're putting all our eggs in one basket. Decreasing bonding ability, $400,000 a year is one of the options. Grants that we don't know if they'll materialize or not, and then won't know till kind of after the fact. I don't know. It's one of those of, if we don't know where our ultimate city boundary will be, if we're kind of stopping at Narcousie at this point and this is the edge of the road, or if it's going all the way up Narcousie, then is it a part of the city or not? And then I really need to get a comfort level that we are financially sound, reducing our debt load and our bonds on everything else before we kind of get ourselves into more debt over a nice to have, not a need to have. So that's kind of my stance on it.
Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. I don't think tonight was, the intent was not to get into all of this. I mean, the intent for tonight was, are we still wanting to move forward and put it under a contract and figure out all this stuff is what tonight is. So I don't think we should really get into the details of this. My comments are, I think it's a need to have personally, but the grants, if we go and pursue grants, I like grants, but grants have a lot of fingers to them and strings, and I've dealt with some of these different grant entities, and they put a lot of restrictions on your property. So that's just something to keep in mind, like if we go to pursue these things, like, I think it's the Florida Communities Trust that there's like a binder about this thick at the county that you can't do this, you can't do that. And no matter what we think today, 5 years from now, there'll be some other like council potentially in place, and then they'll have some different idea, and then you'll have this big binder that's like, you can't do it. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I think the direction we're supposed to give tonight is if we want to move forward with a contract for the due diligence portion, that you just need.
To be clear, this was brought before you out of respect to the property owner. Because they came before you a while back, we went through the process, and we felt that they just needed to know whether the council was serious about moving forward with it. And that's why we handle it this way. So if you're serious about moving forward, we'll work with them, put a contract together, and you can review it at the 21st in anticipation of the meeting on the 21st.
Right.
Do you have consensus?
Councilmember Cooper has a question.
I'd asked Veronica Miller and Bill Sturgeon 2 or 3 or 4 days ago, and I guess Hastings Ranch, the power plant, OUC contract, as far as extension down the road 20 or 8 years, 20 years, whatever. Maybe we ought to think about, before this council of 5 members here decide that we're going to spend, I don't know, $100 million for all this stuff, whatever. Maybe we ought to have a citizen input as far as either a vote, or they put some kind of a survey, or before this gets a lot further down the road right now. I'd feel like a whole lot happier that you've got a Facebook where we got like the Virginia Avenue, where we got the cannery, and we got 20% on the Facebook, and they said that's what they wanted, so that's what we did. And you get a lot of more input from the citizens than what you do from 5 council members. Maybe we're doing good, maybe we're doing bad. But at the same time, if you've got these 3 things here, you've got a power plant, and you're going to add more time to join into with OUC and tie us up for another 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, whatever, or Stevens or Hastings, and we're going to tie in another 8 years for that, to let OUC to pay for it. I feel like it's better to let the citizen to at least give us some kind of input. So I think we ought to look at, ahead. Has anybody got a thought process?
I think this will come
That's why
around.
you have a council meeting.
Yeah, this will come around.
Yeah, I
3 or 4 more
understand.
times.
I'm ahead, but at the same time, we need to get some kind of input if they're,
Well, right now, we're seeking
I
direction on the
understand.
Hastings property.
yes.
So, it's up to the council. I mean, you certainly could do a referendum. I'm maybe a little old school. I don't necessarily think a electronic or internet survey or a Facebook survey, anything like that, is a way to reach out to your citizenry. Communities have in the past, when there have been big acquisitions like this, flat out put it to the voters to do that. I would tell you, though, process-wise, unless you want to have an expensive special election, you're probably a year away before you could have a referendum, a vote on this.
But a survey, as far as putting it in your mailers for
That's your
your
call. You could
your
do that.
electric bill or what like that, we could do that and on Facebook and see what kind of response we're gonna get back. I'd feel safer for all 5 of us.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you.
Mr. Askew.
I believe that we were elected in to make some of these decisions.
Yeah,
If
you do.
I think if you brought it to the citizens and said, hey, look, we're going to take 200 acres and we're not going to build a bunch of houses on them, I think they would go, yippee, well, this is fantastic. I think the price of it is pretty normal. You can look at the price of properties around the Hastings Ranch, and there's one there for 10 acres that they're asking $2-3 million for. So I think it comes back to the Virginia Ave Park. It's like there's an opportunity here to take it. If you've been to the Hastings Ranch, you've been to the events there, we can continue that success as well. Parks are kind of like roads. You don't really make money on them in the big scheme of things, but the enjoyment of life here increases. And, we have some great parks. Our park department is fantastic. So I don't think we need a special meeting. I think we should focus on, do we want to get this property or not? If we don't, then move on and let him sell it. I'm sure he's got people chomping at the bit. If we said no, they're going to go, okay,
Oh, I
great, let's
understand that, yeah.
pile of houses on there. And
Yeah.
and I don't think the Hastings want that. I think they would like the property saved as well. So I don't think we need a special counsel. I think we can help make that decision, and we have probably one of the best finance people here in the last 5 years standing in front of us, so she can help guide us as well. So I'll give you your $5 for saying that. So.
I think 3 of us said,
So do we have a consensus then?
And again, you'll have a
And then-
public, we'll bring it back
Yeah.
based on consensus. There'll be a public hearing on it. The public can address it. And you do it. We'll put the contract on the agenda, and you can have a discussion of it, and we'll work with the Hastings family to get it done as quickly as possible. The contract itself, and then you'll
Sounds
vote
good.
on it.
great.
So-
Do you have anything else for
No,
us?
no, sir.
Anything else? We're adjourned.
Well, that was easy. You can hit it like every time. Just like boom, done.